Okay. Hey guys, that's what I sort of promised or tried to promise you guys last week. Didn't quite work out, but this time is on song. You want to try again? Okay. There you go. Hello everybody. I hope you're all well. I hope you've had a good weekend. I hope you're having a good weekend. I think those of you in Australia, your weekend's over. Those of you in England, it's drawing to a close. Those of you in the States, I think you around about midday. Is that right? Let's just see where the video is. Okay, there it is. Debbie McKellen, hello. Olivia Voss, hi. Good to see you, Stephanie. 12-step woman. Loretta Moon, hello from Scotland. Alyssa Nowak, is it Nowak or Novak? Illinois, hi there. Wendy B, 7 p.m. in the UK. Carol Fiol, regular on Patreon, good to see you. Nicole Boutelier, hello from Cape Breton. Is that Canada? Where's Cape Breton? Victoria Petrovich Hola, hello from the UK. Tickety Boo. So Carol, I see you in Scotland. 12-step woman says it's 2 o'clock in Ohio. Tammy in Texas. Ellen North Watson in London. Desiree Libar, Texas. Corin Skinner from California. Okay, good to see you all. I think I'm going to start off just by telling you guys something that touched me today, something that made an impression. Have any of you guys watched News of the World? It's a film starring Tom Hanks that I think it premiered today on Netflix. Have any of you seen it? It's called News of the World. It's sort of a cowboy movie set in, I think it was 1770 or so, somewhere around there. Anyone seen it? Okay, so the premise of it just broadly is Tom Hanks plays this dude who reads the news, reads newspapers. At that time, a lot of people obviously didn't have the internet, didn't have television, couldn't read, and so he would go to different towns and they would pay him to read various newspapers, and it would sometimes cause kind of a lot of consternation as people got upset with the news, upset with news of war, upset that a bridge had broken down or whatever. But there's the premise of the film is there's a little blonde girl who I think is German. She could be Danish, and she is orphaned twice. So she has her parents, and then I think she's taken in by Indians, and then I think the Indians are killed as well. So she kind of becomes an orphan twice. She's not even sure what language she speaks, because she speaks mostly an Indian language and a little bit of, I guess, German that comes out a little bit. I'm not sure if I must refer to it as Native American, but I think you get what I'm talking about. Anyway, so she's a little blonde child, and he's this quite elderly dude who doesn't really have children and doesn't really want to have children. And then he takes her in. And the part that I want to emphasize, and I took a screen grab I posted onto Instagram, is they on a wagon and they in the middle of nowhere, and he says to her, "You mustn't look back," or something like that. Don't dwell in the past. And she says no. She stops him and she says no. To move forward, you must remember. You must first remember. And that really made me think about the JonBenet Ramsey case. To move forward, you must first remember. And I think there's a lot of amnesia around the JonBenet Ramsey case. I think there's a lot of misinformation. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. And so I hope that this 50-part series that I've just done will help people remember JonBenet on the 25-year anniversary, right? Thanks, Carol. Appreciate it. Do you guys agree? We need to remember JonBenet properly before it can go forward, and that applies to just this case on its own. One's got to remember. I think that the words remember is another way of saying, confront until the truth about what we know. That's what we mean by remember. Remember honestly. And I think we've been remembering dishonestly for a lot of those 25 years. Think about the grand jury thing, where it took something like 16 years for the grand jury verdict to come out. Most of what we're remembering in the JonBenet Ramsey thing isn't accurate, and that's a problem. Hello, Robbie Robin from Staffordshire, UK. Gillian Morrison. Debbie McClellan says, I don't have a problem remembering JonBenet was born on my 35th birthday. Okay. I'm trying to do a calculation of how old you would be now. Never been into crime before. You made me an addict, really. You mean me, or true crime itself? True crime is addictive anyway. I'm not sure who said that I've made that person an addict, but it would be interesting to know how many people that are here right now are women, because that's something I just want to touch on quickly, is why are there so many women in true crime? What do you guys think? Margarita Henry, hi from South Africa. Hello. Happy Valentine's Day, guys. Hope you've had a happy Valentine's Day. It can sometimes be a miserable day for some people, just like Christmas can be miserable, New Year's can be miserable. But so Marcella says, because women analyze more than men. That's an interesting answer. Someone says female here. Carol says because we're nosy, maybe. AD, that's different AD, says greetings from San Diego. Janae Ann, I like the psychology of it. I think that's quite a good point, is that I did a little bit of digging around, not a lot, but I think what is interesting is we are trying to understand how people think. And I think women, sometimes don't understand men and vice versa. So I think that is part of it. I think also men and women sometimes wonder what we're not being told by the other men and women around. So I'm talking about in a work situation, by politicians, by our friends, by our neighbors. And I think through true crime, it makes us realize that there is deliberate deceit going on, and this is how it works, right? Stephanie says, we want to understand, okay? Sakura Girl says, true crime fits well with my job. What's your job? 12-Step Woman said, I learned to leave my emotions out. It impedes investigation. That's a good point there. So just a couple of things that I think are quite interesting. Someone wrote that true crime stories allow women to talk about and explore vulnerability, to process our own anxieties. Olivia Voss, is that from Australia? Thank you very much. $7.99. Thank you very much. Okay. What do you guys think about that? That it allows us to explore vulnerability, and so in other words, you're talking about someone else, but you're talking about for example, look at the Watts case. you're talking about their strengths and weaknesses. Maybe they should have saved money. Maybe they shouldn't have done that. But it allows us to maybe talk about other people's weaknesses and in a way acknowledge our own. Don't you think? Another one is, if you take the Ramsays, you look at the vulnerabilities of children that might remind us of our vulnerabilities when we were children, of what sibling rivalry that we may have just put behind us, make us think about that. If you look at the Ramsay parents, John was a businessman. It made me think a little bit of my family, because my father was also a businessman who was absent a lot, working. And my mother was actually also a beauty queen, not so much into pageants, but she certainly was that. So that definitely made me think about it a little bit, I guess, more than I would have otherwise. And so almost through true crime, you can examine things about yourself in an indirect way that's less personal, but is also familiar. So I think that's quite interesting. Angela says, what's wrong with this world? Is that why you're interested in true crime, to try and figure it out? Jason says, women are natural detectives by their very nature, and he's kind of got a wink there. I think that's quite true. I think that is the case. I think anyone that's quite insecure in a way, I'm talking about whether it's a young person or an older person, whether it's a man or a woman, if you're quite insecure, you're going to be asking a lot of questions. And I'm just saying, if someone who's almost overconfident, if there's a lot of hubris, you're not going to be asking a lot of questions. It might be not a good thing. Tammy says she was killed in a different house. Okay. So just something else I want to talk about is, I think something about true crime is processing our own anxieties. And what I mean by that is, we don't really realize it, but we do have a fear of death. We have a fear that we're not in control. And I think true crime presents this fortress of information. And there's some reassurance in the fact that someone is caring enough to get this information, to bring it to light, to work out what happened. And I mean, the fact is, in many crimes that doesn't happen. People don't care. People are lost through the ether. People are lost through the great, in a way, and I do think a lot of people are processing their own anxieties, but in a way that's not very accurate. So in other words, you might have certain things happen to you or a certain partner, and then, for example, in the Chris Watts case, you see a narcissist where maybe your partner was a narcissist, and so through Chris Watts, you see this person that you've really despised. But I don't know if that's necessarily accurate. Someone wrote about how disproportionately true crime favors stories about attractive middle-class white women who've gone missing or whatever. And I think the Ramsay case is very much about an attractive probably upper class white woman. She didn't go missing, but her child went missing. And I think, tell me if I'm wrong, doesn't the Ramsay case really center around Patsy? For better or worse, whether it's true or not, it's kind of all about Patsy. Didn't Patsy write the ransom? Wow, what is this? David van der Veen, 200. Wow, I think that's the most anyone has ever given me. Okay, so it's actually Annie from Ontario using my husband's computer. You say, thanks for all you do. It's a pleasure. Question, who would you like most to collaborate or interview on your YouTube channel involving the JonBenet Ramsay case? Who would I like to collaborate with or interview? Interesting question. I have thought about it a little bit. Wouldn't mind talking to Carol McKinley. I think that there could be some insights and some interesting discussions shared there. I know she's gone with the JonBenet Ramsey case a long way, so I appreciate that question. So Carol McKinley would be one of them. I've actually emailed her directly a couple of times. So I think that would definitely be an interesting discussion. Do you mean just on the JonBenet Ramsey case? Yeah, Lisa Wilson, I'm also like, wow. Mona R, hello, love your channel. Thank you very much. So yeah, Carol McKinney, I quite respect. I don't know how many people that were involved in the JonBenet Ramsey case are still alive, but I wouldn't mind interviewing one of the housekeepers. I wouldn't mind interviewing Steve Thomas. I think that would be quite interesting. I think he's done though. I think he's done with interviews. So yeah, some of the people that were very close to the case. I'm just trying to think of someone else. Fleet White, obviously, I wouldn't mind talking to, but I also think he's done with it. So David, you say no in general. So other cases as well. I actually came across a psychologist who, when I saw her channel, I thought, wow, maybe I should contact her. And then when I listened to her analysis of Chris Watts, I was like, okay, I don't think that's going to work. So, but I am interested in talking to psychologists. I did talk to Beth Karras once upon a time, and that was quite interesting. So prosecutors I'd be interested in talking to, but not really so much in the JonBenet Ramsey case. I think I wouldn't mind speaking to Jane Harmer in the JonBenet Ramsey case. Some of the Boulder police I wouldn't, but I don't think they're allowed to talk about it. So, okay, so just to carry on with this, and I'm just quoting from an article, I can't remember where I read it, but they were talking about individual psychology, and where the villain is always an individual bad person instead of equally important but more complicated structural factors. And I just want to bring your attention to that in terms of the Ramsey case, right? So just this concept that the villain is this bad person, right? So you might think if John did it, or Patsy did it, or this one did it, or that one did it, that's a bad person, right? And I think what we need to try to do is mirror that thinking. So obviously when things like this happen, it's not good. And, certain people do things that are not good. But I think the other side to that story is what is the structural factors? What is the community? What's going on that's making this happen? And, I don't think John or Patsy did anything to JonBenet, but I do think John was very busy and was working, and so do a lot of people. A lot of people work. Why are you working? Are you working for your family? Are you working for yourself? Are you working because there's a lot of treasure? What is it all about? If you look at Patsy, was she doing the pageants because she loved JonBenet, or because she loved something else? Loved dressing things up, loved pageantry more than maybe a person, kind of thing. But I do think it's important to look at Boulder as a community, not look at it as, okay, Boulder is a horrible place to find justice, but that Boulder is emblematic of other people, of other communities around the world, and it shows how difficult it is to sort them out. I see Annie Thomas is here, Donnie Springer, Salty Psychic. Mona R says, I think JonBenet was tired of the pageants. I think she was tired of them at that stage, but I don't know if it was a case that she wanted to retire. I don't think she was done with them. Ian Kelly, Patsy was living her life through JonBenet. I think that's true. I saw an interview with her recently where Patsy was just saying, you have no idea how much fun it was. And so you get a feeling that it was something that she did with her sisters, with her mother, and JonBenet was winning everything, and I think that felt pretty good. Bling is the new black. Okay. Hey from Dallas, 14 degrees and snowing. That's something I also want to touch on is the weather. Where I am, it is very hot, very humid, very oppressive kind of heat. I'm from an area that has quite a dry climate, so we're not used to this kind of humidity. I went for a walk with Timmy a couple of hours ago, and there were like tropical bands of like black and gray and then white clouds with bright blue in between. And just the sky is just full of moisture. It's quite interesting. The church lady Reed Show TM. Not sure what your name is, but hello. Mo Beans, New Jersey, humidity is the worst. Yeah, and that is pretty bad. I believe it's going to cool down in about 2 days. Melissa Howell Kelly. Okay. Interesting idea there. I just want to finish off with this thing on true crime and women. They say that this is someone that, I can't remember who wrote this, that women would be more likely to be drawn to true crime because they're more interested in the psychology of the killer. I do think that is a weird thing where, a lot of us are drawn into true crime, like Chris Watts. Why did he do it? Right? And people spend so much time thinking about it, talking about it, and then at the end of the day, can people say why he did it? If you go to some of these really big channels and say, okay, tell me, why did this crime happen? I challenge a lot of those guys. Are they going to be able to tell you in a couple of sentences why, for example, Chris Watts did what he did, or why JonBenet was killed? Some of those answers I can give you, but I would prefer to do it in something like this where you can get the background of it. Can you see that? I'll talk to you guys a little bit more about The Craven Silence. This book came out just before the case of JonBenet Ramsey. So, and it was the first of about 10 or 11 books that I wrote about it. But I'll talk to you about it more in a moment. The thing that I find interesting with true crime is it can be cathartic if you treat it in a certain way. So, for example, the Chris Watts case, I found it quite cathartic. My problems, my criticisms with certain things that were going on at the time, I felt that the Chris Watts case addressed. But then you've got to sort of move on from that. That's just how I found it. Stephanie says, don't forget to like and subscribe. He worked very hard on it. I definitely did. I'm pretty worn out doing these episodes since the 10th of December. The good news for those on Patreon is I'm going to be continuing with a series, bonus episodes, dealing with certain quite sensitive subject matter. I don't think I'm going to be putting previews onto YouTube, so that'll just be exclusive to the folks on YouTube. I will probably be starting The Ripper, and you probably don't know too much about that, but that promises to be very, very compelling viewing and a compelling series. I think it's going to be quite astonishing. If you don't know about The Ripper and you've got Netflix, then try and watch it so that you're up to speed. Heather West says, yay, The Ripper. Stephanie says, I'm excited for that series. Lisa says, you taking a break gives me a chance to watch old videos. Well, there's definitely a huge archive that's there. Helle Fustrup, not sure if I'm saying it right, Helle Fustrup, from Copenhagen, Denmark. Weather is -3, clear, 8:30. That's somewhere I've always wanted to go. Actually, there's a guy there's a friend of mine I was at school with who had Danish ancestry. Quite a good-looking guy, quite a good sportsman as well. Sans Dolphin, my ex was easily led by another woman like Chris Watts. I think she put a hex on me. Okay, interesting. Are you from South Africa? Just looking at the slang you're using there. Okay, so Anne Elizabeth Elvis. Okay, which one do you mean, the Yorkshire Ripper or Jack the Ripper? What's the Yorkshire Ripper? Is it Peter Sutcliffe, I think? Okay, so as I was saying, I find true crime quite cathartic when you can bring it back to us. And, I think what you can learn from, what do you learn from the JonBenet Ramsey case? And that's something I kind of want to ask you guys. Did you learn anything new? Did you learn anything new through what transpired through these 50 episodes? Was there something you learned that you didn't know? Bear in mind, it's a 24, almost 25-year-old case. Peter Sutcliffe, did you learn something? Ruth Ann says, which one of your JonBenet Ramsey books do you recommend starting with? I would say this one, The Craven Silence. That's the first book. The very last book, actually, the cover looks a bit like that. That is called Christmas Star. That's quite a short book, the very last book. Obviously, the last book's got my latest thinking. The first book is how the thinking started. But I'll take you through some of the chapters in The Craven Silence in a moment. I think for me, why I'm interested in true crime is that it, besides trying to understand a criminal's mindset, which can be a challenge, it's almost like solving a puzzle. And I do believe you can solve it with enough time and energy, just like a big puzzle. If you spend enough time, you do get all the pieces. I think it promotes a sense of justice. True crime done the right way. Certainly true crime done the wrong way doesn't. But true crime done the right way promotes a sense of justice. And that is why the JonBenet Ramsey case is so heartbreaking and frustrating, is that you feel like we've been defeated, that the efforts for justice have been defeated in that particular case. I think when you think about the JonBenet Ramsey case enough, it covers full circle, where you sort of get an unsettled sense of peace about what may have happened. Not that it's acceptable, but that you kind of come to a sense of understanding. But I'm the first person to say I think the case should have gone to court. I think the district attorney should have signed off on those indictments, and it could have been sorted out then and there. Gillian Morrison, she says, I learned so much. I had underestimated the misdirection. Robbie Robin, I hadn't known about the indictment, really. Wow, that's interesting. That is something that just isn't mentioned very often. I think something that it's difficult to say what I didn't know, because I might, if I'm doing an audiobook, I might come across some things that are there and realize, oh, I did actually cover this. But I'll give you an example. Someone asked me the other day, something like, how did you know John Ramsey's camera was a Pentax ZX10, I think? And I couldn't answer the question. I'm not sure how I know that. I can't actually say. So yeah, when you've done so much work, you don't remember everything. But I think the clothing in JonBenet's bathroom was something that if I knew, I'd certainly forgotten. I don't think I was. I thought I remembered something between the two beds, that there was something lying there. When I did research it, I couldn't really find anything clearly there, and then eventually I stumbled upon an image that did have that. Something that I find very weird with these cases is how you go down rabbit holes to find a particular image sometimes. You struggle to find an image that you know exists, but you can't get. One image that I can't remember if I have or not, in my mind I feel like I've seen it, but I can't say for sure, is the picture that Berg drew of the family. So in other words, I think his father was in an aeroplane, and then Patsy was in it, and then he was in it, and then JonBenet wasn't anywhere. And I feel like I've seen that picture, but I couldn't find it. So it might be my imagination, it's hard to say. Jay-Z says there are a couple of good wiki sites. Were those some of your sources for JonBenet? Not really. My sources for the JonBenet case were, for example, this book, which has got all the police interrogations in it, although you can get the police interrogations online, and also this book. Can you see that? Yeah. And then basically all the books on the JonBenet Ramsey case. And then there's A Candy Rose is a great resource. And I'm just trying to think. There's quite a lot online. Sometimes a very specific piece of evidence or discussion you only get in a forum, or that's the only place you're going to find it. And you've got to remember, often things have been redacted or edited. Sometimes news stories are gone. I think another big resource that I've used or been able to rely on are news sources. So you might Google footprints in snow and come up with a Daily Camera story kind of thing. Angel 5555, thank you very much. Appreciate it. $10, thank you. I sometimes wish I knew your real names, because it feels a bit impersonal reading that, like Angel 5555, but I'm sure you are a real person. It would be nice to see your face, but thank you very much. Foreign Faction is a great book. That's what Ruth Ann says. Yeah, I agree. It's also got some good photos. It's also got some great reports at the back. There's quite a scathing letter that he provides from Mary Lacey right at the end, where she basically asks him to just give him everything that they've given to him, the police files, and, don't let the door hit you on the way out kind of thing. Liz Sheldon, I'm not sure you're referring to there. Oracles and Beyond. Loving your channel, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm about to deal with some of your questions. I've just made a short list. I've got some information here. I've just sort of emailed it to myself. So I can't remember who wrote this, but they said, if the ransom note was left on the floor, why do the photos show it on the steps? This is an example of something that for me is quite obvious, but it might be frustrating the heck out of someone else, where it's like, well, I just don't understand. And I think there was something like that as well with a photo video that I did yesterday, where I'm quite clear on what I'm talking about, but someone else may not be. Anyway, so the answer is none of those photos are the photos of the ransom note. So let me be clear. There are no photos of the ransom note in situ, certainly not that I'm aware of. So those photos that you see are from dramatizations, they're from recreations, right? What is interesting is the discrepancy where Patsy said, well, the ransom note was on the bottom step or close to the bottom step. But I think when the officer came in, he found it on the floor, on the wooden floor, like the 3 pages. So you even have that part quite unclear. Is like, but certainly the part that is clear is that no one handed anyone else the ransom note, that the ransom note's on the ground. Then you might say, why? I think that actually that's a question that comes up quite soon, so we can maybe deal with it in a second. Stephanie says, Miss Jensk 1, I appreciate your thoughts in the comments of TCRS videos. Keela Fox, thank you for answering my question. Was that your question? Okay. Suzanne Gamble, it's always been clear the blame belongs to the Ramses. Okay. Okay, so here's another question. Can anyone tell me what they think about why Patsy had the same clothes on and her makeup on? What happened all night that she couldn't even change? She never went to bed while all this was going on, question mark. An accident doesn't explain this, or just a premise she had something to do with the ransom note writing and staging that hours before JonBenet died. 12-step woman, just saw this green bar. Thank you very much. You say that I care about my subscribers. I do care about, I mean, it's like a community now. It's a people that you know how certain people respond to certain things. So that is true. You say you are gifted with educating us. Well, that's nice to hear. Wow, it's really coming through. Annie, $50, that's another, well, look at that guy jumping up there. Is it a guy? That's pretty cool. That's quite a clever, almost Valentine's Day themed thing. I quite like it. Okay. Thanks a lot, Annie. Appreciate it. Where was I? I try to reason this in about Patsy, and it doesn't make sense to me how she would never change. I think this fact is very telling, but what does it mean? I get what she's asking. She's sort of saying, well, I'm losing my train of thought here. Let me first just thank Midnight Sun. Thank you. Okay. Is that a pear? Okay, a pear with a bandana on. What's quite interesting, someone actually mentioned that the throw rug that was found on JonBenet, on the carpet, but the rug that was thrown over her actually has pineapple patterns actually on it, which is very ironic, isn't it? I don't know if that's something I'd ever noticed, but someone actually pointed that out, 12 Steps Woman says, Nick, we all sincerely care about you too. Okay, no, I appreciate that. And I think if you do care about me, I probably need to take tomorrow off. I need to rest and recharge so that for the next series I can be fresh and, have acuity in my thinking, Thank you very much for that. Thanks, guys. So just to address this, this is how I answer it. This is my opinion. I think it's a combination of two things. I think the reason Patsy was in her clothes all night was she was busy. She was preoccupied, right? So that I think is the first thing. I think the second thing is, why not change your clothes just before the officers arrived? I think the answer to that is plausible deniability. I think that the Ramses were, to some extent, smart enough, but I think you could also say paranoid enough to say, well, if you're aware that you have a crime scene that is explicit, right? If you're aware that there are things that are visible, like to the naked eye, I'm talking about stains and marks and objects, that kind of thing. But there's also the microscopic side to crime scenes. Things like fibers, things like fingerprints, things like hairs, and so on. And if you're aware of that, then you might take extra care either to get rid of that or to have plausible deniability. So, for example, if you saw Patsy wearing certain clothing and then you found some of these fibers on JonBenet, well, then Patsy could say, obviously, didn't you? All my friends saw me hugging JonBenet on the carpet, right? But that's fine, but you couldn't really explain how those fibers could get behind the duct tape, on the sticky side of the duct tape, if the duct tape never made it upstairs. So you have situations like that. Also, if there are no fingerprints on the ransom note, you've got to ask, well, and someone I think asked this, it said, why be so silly about it? Why not put your fingerprints on the ransom note? It's an interesting one, but I think part of it is you don't want to even go there. So you rather have no fingerprints on there, even though they should be there, so that you can say, I had nothing to do with the ransom note. That I think is the idea. Carol said, I asked that too, as in, of course you would pick it up. Yes, you would definitely pick it up. So someone called Mindy, who's on Patreon, said, here it is. I will also never understand why the Ramseys thought it was normal to never handle the note. I know that they knew what was in the note, so there was no need to actually read it. And then I've highlighted this in bold. But they are unbelievably something to think that they would look less guilty or innocent if their prints weren't on it. I don't think that is not being intelligent. I think that is being extra careful. That's what it looks like. It looks like it's being... Sorry, my throat's a bit dry. Bria Lace, were the 2 cans of soda found in Burke's bedroom bathroom sink, or the sink in the basement bathroom with the unflushed poop in the toilet? That's a really good question. I wish I could answer you confidently. What I can tell you is there are other cans of soda, I think they're Dr. Pepper, in the basement as well. Something I haven't really talked about in the 50 episodes. There are other cans of Dr. Pepper that you actually see in video footage of the basement. And you've got to ask, well, who would have consumed these cans of cool drink, soda? What I think would also be interesting is whose fingerprints would be on those soda cans, and I don't think whoever left them there would have thought to remove them. Someone said that a child drinking soda late at night or at night wouldn't be able to sleep. I agree with that. I think that's a very interesting premise. I can't say for sure where that is. I think it might be a bathroom sink associated with a bedroom. I seem to remember video footage zooming in on that basin, and I seem to remember it was associated with a bedroom, but I could be wrong. The first time I actually saw those soda cans was on Cotton Star's Instagram. So he might have a absolutely clear answer to that. But I do think that is a very interesting thought. Part of that thought is there are 2 cans in the basin. Does that mean there were 2 people drinking those cans? It would be interesting to know who they were. It's not a smoking gun. Those cans that could have been deposited there the whole of Christmas Day or in the afternoon. It's difficult to say. But I think it does. The fact that you have cans in basins shows you how things were quite untidy, right? Mo Bean says, "Who is Cotton Star?" That's just an avatar of someone who knows quite a lot about the case. Another one who knows quite a lot about the case is Blue Crab. On forums, they just seem to have quite a lot of insight. You can go to Cotton Star on Instagram and just look at his profile. So I don't know if I've answered the question about the fingerprints on the ransom note to completion, but I think it's basically the same answer as why was Patsy wearing the same clothing? Then there's a question, I think it's from Catherine. It's really long, but I've highlighted a part here. I hope I'm going to get the right part. She says, although the counts the grand jury voted to indict the Ramsays on could be read to implicate that they were accessories to a murder and death by child abuse committed by a third person. This is the part I've highlighted. She says, it's not entirely clear that the indictments were intended to implicate a third person. Do you guys agree with that? Like, do you agree that it's not entirely clear that the indictments were intended to implicate a third person? I kind of argue that both ways. How I argue that is, first of all, as far as I'm concerned, I think it is quite clear. On the other hand, if you say it's not clear, well, there's perhaps a legal reason for that, because you can't actually say that, if that makes sense. Then she goes on to say, a reading of the indictment language read strictly appears to point to John Ramsay and Patsy Ramsay being the direct actors. Maybe I misunderstand, maybe I haven't read it that way, but I don't see it that way. They're talking about protecting someone from protecting a child. So I don't quite see it that way, but it might be a matter of interpretation. Then the next question, wow, Carol says, I'm so hungover. Carol, I've got to tell you, I feel for you. I think I've had at least 3 gin and tonics today, which for me is quite a lot. But I'm also I'm not feeling hungover, but I'm certainly feeling a little bit worn out, I guess, yeah. So anyway, Carol, I hope you feel better soon. Don't drink anymore. Let me put it that way. Laurie, a regular on Patreon, wrote, Dr. Phil originally came to prominence, and this is really, for me, a great comment. Catherine Hargrave, thanks for discussing my question, Nick. She says, as I say, it's not clear. Okay. Laurie writes, Dr. Phil originally came to prominence when Oprah, facing a lawsuit, hired his trial consulting company to assist Coacher with testimony. The company Courtroom Sciences describes itself as specializing in witness effectiveness training, refining testimony, crisis management, and media relations. Listening to this interview, and she's referring to Berg Ramsay on Dr. Phil, is a reminder that Lynn Wood's suggestion for Berg to break his silence through Dr. Phil was a shrewd choice. I just think that that's pretty incredible, is that Dr. Phil worked previously advising people like Oprah on how to testify, well, she says assisting and coaching with testimony. But the actual company describes itself as witness effectiveness training, refining testimony, crisis management, and media relations. Now, if you take that little thing, and you take it into the Ramsey case, and you say, well, when Dr. Phil interviewed Burke, did he assist Burke in that way? Did he assist him? Maybe from Burke Ramsey's perspective, he was just being interviewed. But is it possible that there was more to it than that? That there was, how can I put it? That there was. Well, I don't want to take it any further than that. I think I've got to be careful, but I think it is interesting that Dr. Phil helped Oprah facing a lawsuit, and he's helped other clients in like a legal crisis. And I think Burke was about to face a tough documentary, and one's got to ask, did Dr. Phil assist him or not? Is it explicitly like that or not, whatever? I think it's definitely an interesting question. Sagiti Nona, which parts of the physical evidence and injuries are from previous incidents? It's quite difficult to say. Not sure if I'm going to go into that right here, because there's certain injuries that are, that there's been a pattern, and then I think some of the injuries to JonBenet that have been forgotten about is that she had scratches on her back, and I think on her back, and I think somewhere on her legs or something like that. That's quite overlooked. But I do believe that she was initially lying on her back, and then she squirmed around onto her stomach, and maybe try to stand up or crawl away. And it was during that motion that I think she was struck on the head. Of course, there were other things going on as well, but okay, so do you guys have any other questions? I've kind of gone through all of the ones that I meant to. Wow, see, we've almost blown through an hour already. It's pretty crazy. Stephanie says, yes, she tried to move away. I believe that as well. I think the scream was part of that as well. Okay, so I'm going to just go through the Craven Silence table of contents, just so you guys have got an idea. The first chapter is the call, so there's quite a lot of effort put into the call. And I remember when I went back to this book, now bear in mind this book was written in 2016, published September 2016. I remember when I went back to this book being quite shocked that sorry, please excuse me. I was quite shocked that very early on, I think the discussion was, where did this 911 call take place? And I kind of feel like when I wrote this book, I was still finding my feet as a true crime author. I remember being quite intimidated by the JonBenet Ramsey case. I thought, you playing with the big boys now, and you're going to be laughed out of the whole true crime community if you don't get your story straight. And, this isn't the easiest case in the world, although it's certainly easier than it seems. There's so much murk that it seems a lot more complicated, and the scale and scope of it seems a lot more intimidating than it actually is. But the thing that I think was quite a strong start to this book was me and my co-author Lisa Wilson asked a question: where in the house was this 911 call done? And I don't think other people have asked that question. I don't think it came up in the CBS documentary. I don't know. I could be wrong. I don't know if it's come up in the other narratives. I mean, my memory might be a bit fuzzy, but what we did was we carefully went through all the footage, and it's not easy to find, but you eventually do find that there's also a phone in the basement. And what I think you've got to bear in mind is if there's furtive activity going on through the night, then in a house that's got 104 windows, and that slide with 104 windows was present in the credits of maybe 30 or 40 of the videos. It's there for a reason. And what you're sort of saying is, if people are running around at night writing ransom notes, and you need a torch for that, or you need a light on in order to write that, then where are you going to be able to do it without anyone seeing you, right? And anyway, so the thought was, where would this 911 call likely have happened? Now, the story is that the call was made from the kitchen, but the problem is that the kitchen phone is a vertically mounted phone, right? So it's difficult to cradle a phone and then it's not properly cradled on a vertically mounted phone. Do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, if you don't cradle a phone, your handset properly, bear in mind this is 1996, before there were cell phones, right? I think the Ramseys did have some of those phones that you walk around the house that transmit to a kind of a receiver. It's not a cell phone, but it's a cordless phone. I think they had something like that. But the point is, this wall-mounted phone meant that it was very unlikely that Patsy didn't cradle the phone properly. Not impossible, but unlikely. So we thought, well, couldn't there be another phone? And it turns out there is another phone in the basement. And of course, that phone is not mounted, it's resting on a table. And so our theory was that the phone was not cradled properly. And as a result, that was why, Patsy definitely did put the phone down quite hurriedly. I think Patsy wanted to just speak briefly and then put the phone down. I think she put the phone down perhaps too quickly, and so there's this static that goes on after she puts the phone down, and that is addressed in the very first chapter. And then the second chapter deals with the ransom note. So I'm just going through some of these here. The next one deals with, was the author of the ransom note really a kidnapper? Then the next one, Boulder Police Detective Linda Arendt. Then there's a chapter just titled Problem, exclamation mark. Then the garland, the high-tech boot, and the pineapple. I think that's something that's also not mentioned very often, is that a little piece of Christmas decoration was found in JonBenet's hair. And you could say that came from when she was brought down the stairs, or when she was put on the carpet below the Christmas tree, right? It's difficult to say, but I think that is interesting. Where did that Christmas garland come from? Something else that someone asked, I can't quite remember where I saw it, but someone said there were two things in JonBenet's hair. I think a blue bow, a blue something that would tie her hair, and then also the other one, the other ribbon. And then she wanted to see pictures of that. There is a sketch. Someone did a sketch of how JonBenet was found. Bear in mind, we can't see how she was found because her body was moved. So we've got to rely on, I guess, John Ramsey's description and possibly also Fleet White's. What did it look like? Melanie says, what book are you referencing? I'm referencing my book, The Craven Silence. So in that sketch, you can see that she's kind of got her hair in a strange, like double ponytail, but sort of, I think it's one over the other. And so some people have said, I don't see anything wrong with JonBenet going to sleep with hair ties in her hair. Well, now it's two hair ties, so I think you've got to consider that. Carol says something about that. Okay. Stephanie says, I wonder how deep the connections the DA had with the Ramseys. That is something that we researched. We looked at bear in mind, because John had a big business in Boulder, he needed office space, and then I think Access Graphics had an office in Pearl Street, and then I think because the company grew so rapidly, I think they had to purchase or rent additional office space, and then I think certain legal people were also kind of like somehow involved in property development. I think something also that's quite interesting and perhaps not that well known is that someone says, Donnie says Hunter was a land developer, okay, and has ties to Ramsey lead attorney. I think I saw something about that Mike Bynum was a former assistant district attorney. So the guy who advised John Ramsey was actually a former assistant district attorney long before all of this happened. So he would have known how everything works. But I think those business things, activities that were going on are certainly quite interesting. They're quite difficult to find. As far as I remember, the house that the Ramseys lived in, 755 15th Street, was, I think, I don't want to misspeak. I kind of would prefer to have it in front of me than just to say something, but effectively, I think Lockheed Martin took it back, the house, and then I think it was sold or acquired from them, from John's company, former company, by a consortium. And I think, so that's quite interesting to look into, is the people who effectively took over that property. I think it's also quite interesting. Gillian Morrison asked which scout troop Burke was in. I don't know. Someone said that he was actually a Cub Scout. I think he would have been in kind of the same, like if you take his age, I think that would give you a good idea, but I don't actually know that. I do actually have this book that I want to talk about. It's the Boy Scout Handbook of the Boy Scouts of America, and it's really got some interesting content in it, which I want to take the folks on Patreon through. So just to go on with The Craven Silence, just a couple of other chapters. There's a chapter called Lawyering Up. There's a chapter on Burke. So it is separated. The Craven Silence is separated into one section called Craven, the next Silence, the next Broken Silence. So in the Silence section, there's a chapter on Burke. There's a chapter on motive, when fiction becomes fact. There's a chapter on Patsy. There's a chapter on the pitfalls of Patsy's perfectionism and the other side of Patsy. So quite a few chapters on Patsy. John, and then also on JonBenet. And then the last section is broken silence. There are a couple of chapters here, odd ducks and duct tape. The Ramsey infomercials, I think that is just to do with the CNN interviews. The no snow myth, that's another chapter. A Christmas message from the Ramsey family, that's I think where we looked at the way Patsy expressed herself in the Christmas newsletters, and there were more than one. Then there's another one, white noise, I think that might have to do with Fleet White. And then the scream and the silence. And so it was important to end this book on an important note, which is, did you know that someone actually screamed on the night that JonBenet died? And a lot of people just aren't aware of that. And what's interesting, if Kim Archuleta was asked not to talk about what was going on, well, I need to quickly deal with this. Victoria Petrovich, £10, thank you very much. She says, you've done an incredible job on this case. I hope one day it reaches the Ramseys. I'm not sure if I do. Also, I can't wait for the Ripper videos. Okay, so that is going to be coming up. I think you're going to find the Ripper videos pretty visceral. I think you're going to find them pretty visceral. We actually have access to the actual Peter Sutcliffe's detailed first-person account of what is going on, and it is pretty horrifying. I find it interesting because you're assuming what he's saying is, how can I put it? You're assuming this is a confession just with Chris Watts, and I think you've got to be very careful with any murderer when they're saying, okay, I'm going to tell you everything that happened. They might tell you 60%, maybe with certain things 80%, but there's certain things that I think they would feel, okay, I just can't tell you that. That's too sensitive. Someone says, did they find DNA under JonBenet's fingernails? Yes, they found mostly her DNA, and then they found a small amount of someone else's DNA. So I was a little bit thrown by that super chat. Thanks very much. I don't know where I was. What was I actually talking about? The Ripper. So the Ripper, what you've got to remember with these crimes is every crime is, like we deal with Chris Watts and we deal with JonBenet Ramsey and we deal with Madeleine McCann. But a crime like from the Ripper is each one is a person that has died. And then another person dies, and another person dies. And it's easy to turn it into, how can I put it, like, well, just name, date, whatever. Okay, so let's move on. Each one of those crimes is a tragedy and a nightmare and a catastrophe and deserves its own full-on investigation, right? And it's often easy when there's a serial killer to sort of go, oh, it's just another victim. Or you might be very angry about it or fearful about it. But what I'm trying to say is it tends to be, oh, well, it's just another victim. And the mistake that is made is you need to investigate each crime with the same attention to detail as you would one crime in isolation. And I think what happens is there's just a sense of, let's throw this crime into the basket of all these other crimes. It's easy to say in retrospect, but when I wrote Slaughter and also Incel, and I dealt with mass killings, I felt the strain of trying to do justice to all the victims. In other words, that's a crime scene, that victim died, that's a person, then it moves to there. And, to do it in a proper way is incredibly exhausting. What is going to make my job easier when I do the Ripper series is that he's provided so much description and insight for what he's talking about. Having said that, it's misleading because, for example, the crime itself, he almost doesn't mention. It's almost like when it was over kind of thing. And that is going to be something I want to impress upon you, is how he's manipulating you even when you think he's telling horrible things and all that kind of thing. I do think it's a fascinating insight into the criminal mind in an area that we haven't really gone into before. Nay, folk, this channel is so amazing, blown multi times. Thank you. Thanks for that. Catherine Mispensky, Patsy dabbled in painting. That was something that we covered. Diane Wilson, I watched the documentary on Discovery Plus, more about the detective who thought it was an intruder, Lou Smith. A lot of people spell it like Schmidt or something. It's S-M-I-T. He was smart, but it was 1996. He said there was DNA left. Something that I did that I think is important to do, and very few have done, is go into Lou Smith's backstory, look at the very last case that he did, not only the last case, but the last few cases. And you can see how that informs his cognitive bias in this case, is he takes I think it's Heather Dawn Church, he takes that case. If you go and study up a little bit on the Heather Dawn Church case and you apply that to JonBenet, you're going to see exactly how Lou Smith thought about stuff. Sly Sonia, wow, what a name. Love your videos. Thanks, Sly Sonia. Kate says, I'm late to watch the replay. Happy Valentine's Day. My favorite YouTuber. Thanks a lot. Appreciate that. It is Stacy Tarot Reader. Someone Until Tomorrow says hi. I think Until Tomorrow was complaining that the images weren't synced or something. I did provide a link for you guys to just go and look at the images if you wanted to. I don't know if you did. What's in the note about the basement? Not sure what that's about. Kate says, you're simply the best. Thank you, Kate. Simply the best. Thanks very much. Where are we at? We're at 1 hour, 13 minutes. Stephanie's always been so generous, not just with her time, but just with, I don't know, just in general. It's always nice to, I don't want to say get something from you, but to, see you involved in the channel. She says Ruth Ann would like, what? Just missed that now. Ruth Ann would like to know if you think the cord around JonBenet's neck was used to drag her body. And happy Valentine's Day. Thanks, Stephanie. So let me answer that in two ways. So the first thing is, I don't think JonBenet was dragged. How can I put it? I don't think that after she died that she was dragged somewhere with this thing. Right? So that's the first thing. The other thing is, I'm not sure if I believe this, but I've thought about it. It's possible that the toggle rope was used almost like you would, I've got it's a pity I don't actually have it here, but I've got a gadget that I use with my dog. There's a sort of a yellow handle, which you could say is almost like a stick, holding a stick, but it's not. It's kind of more of a handle, and then there's a little bit of a, I guess, what do they call it? Like a cylinder inside, and then there's a long leash that sort of comes out, almost like a fishing rod reel, right? And then the end of it clips onto Timmy's collar. Now, in the beginning, it would clip onto a collar around his neck, but that would obviously cause him some discomfort, especially if he was running off and then he needed to stop. And then it was subsequently clipped around his harness. So I think it's possible that there was a little bit of maybe a game going on where JonBenet might pretend to be Burke's pet or slave or whatever, just kids playing games. But I don't think that was part of the whole thing when the crime happened. So I don't think that was going on when the crime happened. I could be wrong. It's difficult to know what was going on. I certainly don't think that was used to drag her body. What I think is possible is that it's possible that someone stood on the stick and didn't realize that JonBenet was in distress. So I think that's possible. It's also possible that they intended to pull on the thing, but didn't realize to what extent it was as effective as it was. I hope that answers your question. Just to go a little bit further, and I suppose I could actually find it in this Boy Scouts book. There is something about where you make you tie certain things together, and then you can haul heavy objects using that. I don't know if it's actually, see, you've got these sort of things in it about lashing things together. So I have seen that, but I don't know if, so how can I put it? This whole way of hauling something that is quite heavy, that's something that these toggle ropes are sometimes used for, but I don't believe that was what was happening here. I don't think someone was trying to pull JonBenet in that way. I don't think someone intended to hurt JonBenet, if I can put it that way. Certainly not around her throat. Donnie Springer, okay, Ruth Ann. I think I've lost a few comments here because I went back up. Someone asked, who do you think killed JonBenet? Annie Thomas. Everyone get a drink and cheer Nick. I just poured a glass of wine. Way past noon in Canada. Someone said, okay, Nay folk, do you think JonBenet's arms above her head was part of the staging? No, I don't think it was from being dragged either. I think that was how she died when she fell. Stacey P's in the house. Oh, you've been watching Daytona. Okay. So I see we're at around about 80 minutes. I think we maybe stay on for another 5 minutes or so. Someone just said, okay. Gary Johnson says, guessing solves nothing. I'm not sure what that's in relation to. Radka. I'm always enjoying listening to Nick and reading chat. So cool where you are getting what you are coming for. I mean, no drama, no gossiping or abuse, just smart talk. I like that. That is what we're trying to do here. No drama, we're just trying to figure out what is going on. Helle Fustrip. I'm not sure how much that is, but it's much appreciated. Keep up the good work. Just very much enjoyed. Thank you. Thank you, Helle. I'm not sure if you're from Denmark, but I must say I'm really enjoying some of the Danish movies that I've been watching on Netflix. There was one about Ragnarok or something, and I really enjoyed that. I'm not sure if that was in Denmark, maybe in Finland, but one of the northern countries. I don't know if you saw that, but I really enjoyed that. Really makes me want to go and visit that part of the world. So I don't know if some of you guys missed what I said at the beginning of this episode. There's a movie that has just started on Netflix called News of the World, and it features Tom Hanks, obviously quite an old fellow by now. And he's like a cowboy, but he's sort of, he was a captain in the war. And his job is to read the news. His job is to read the news, and then at some point he comes across a little child, a blonde child with blue eyes, and she doesn't speak English. She speaks some kind of an Indian dialect, and it's kind of a mystery where she's from. She's probably 6 or 7 or 8 years old, and he doesn't really want to look after her. He tries to sort of get rid of her, but ends up conscientiously taking care of her because no one else will. And she's obviously been through trauma. She's actually lost her original parents, then she loses other caregivers, I guess, in a traumatic way. Then I don't want to give away too much, but there's this amazing point where they're on this wagon trail, and it's just them, and it's just endless nothingness in front of them, it's just the road. And now bear in mind, she's a blonde girl with blue eyes, and he tells stories, or he reads the news, and he provides that information to the community. And then he says to her, you must forget the past. You must, in order to survive, in order to move on, you need to forget the past. And she stops him. And she says quite adamantly, no. She says this, I think, in an Indian language, which he's now eventually learned to understand. But I think there's subtitles to that. She says, to move forward, you must first remember. And that's what we've tried to do with the JonBenet Ramsey case. And that's what I want to encourage you guys to do. If you haven't read either of these books, either my book, The Craven Silence, or Foreign Faction, I would encourage you to read it this year on the 25th anniversary. I want to encourage you to remember JonBenet. And I think we can move forward when we've properly remembered her. And I think it means everyone must properly remember her, not just some people. I think we've got to join hands and remember her properly. I'm just sad that there wasn't a way to get the people of Boulder, who I think really cared about this case, to stand up against their own elected officials and make things happen. I don't know if it's too late for that to happen, but, Boulder is almost this little microcosm of the larger world out there. And if we want things to change, we need to be a community that cares, but also that acts, and that other people are accountable to them. So here I'm someone in South Africa touched by the JonBenet Ramsey case to the extent that I've written quite a few books about it. And I think anyone is caught up in it. And you wonder why the people who were there weren't caught up in it. And I think they were, but caught up in it in the wrong way. They were kind of ensnared in it because of other things. I think I've missed a couple of comments again. Someone talks about Cyril West's theory. Someone says, JonBenet is buried not 50 miles from my house. Horrifies me. I was up late one night when the news broke. Horrifying. mostly because law enforcement and authorities screwed up so much, covered up everything. I'm not sure if I think that law enforcement, I don't see law enforcement as, I see that as a myth, that law enforcement made a mess. I think Steve Thomas was a pretty good detective, and the case that the grand jury heard, they ultimately reached a decision. So it's not as though they didn't have enough information. Someone's called Biological Human says, you don't crack someone's skull open and not get bleeding. The crack in her skull was 8 inches long. I think that may be a crazy idiosyncrasy about this case, because the skin under that crack wasn't broken. I do think it's possible that there was blood. It's also possible that her hair was washed. I don't mean necessarily with shampoo, but just rinsed, because her hair does look quite a mess the next morning. There was no blood coming out of her ears or out of her nose, and a very small amount out of her mouth. So in the same way, and I know that this is going to raise some eyebrows, in the same way I think that the sexual trauma is not as much as people think, but it was nevertheless something. The head injury was, despite this long fracture, I'm not convinced that she would have died of the head injury. I think it's possible that she could have died, but I also think it's possible she could have survived it. It was a severe injury, but the damage to her actual brain wasn't that deep, from what I read. I think the damage to her throat tissues was far worse, far more critical. Someone says America's justice system is crooked. Feels like that in other countries as well, I think. And I think what needs to happen is people need their faith restored in some of these institutions. I do think justice costs money, it's sometimes expensive. Okay, so we're coming up to 90 minutes. I think we're going to call it a day. Someone says maybe the head injury is post-mortem. That's something that a lot of people have spoken about, is that which one came first? Was it this one or that one? And I don't see the point in getting caught up in that, although it is an important aspect. But people get very, you're on this side or on that side. And as far as I'm concerned, the head injury and the strangulation were almost simultaneous. And I think that reveals something quite interesting, right? Someone somewhere, I think it was in the early days, said that several minutes or even hours passed between the one injury and the other. I don't believe that at all. But you might have a medical expert saying that. I don't think so. The fact that they can't talk about time of death, I think a statement like that is ludicrous. But certainly in the way that I imagine it, given the scream, given everything, I think the strangulation actually limited the bleeding to some extent. So it's possible that if she wasn't strangled, you would have had more bleeding as well. But I do believe that the head injury and the strangulation were almost simultaneous. Someone says, I love your beard. Wow, okay, thank you. Strange things people thinking about while we're talking about true crime. Annie says, thanks for all your hard work. Thank you. I think I'm going to take tomorrow off and maybe even the next day. I just need to take a break. I've arranged a seaside holiday. I'm not going to say exactly when right now, but it'll probably be I'll probably do a live from there, and you might have a better view than what you're seeing behind me. Angel555 says, thank you, Nick. I have to watch the replay. Came in late. Hit that like. Thanks. Good to hear from you, Angel. Thank you for your contribution earlier. Mary Cohen, this case is one of a kind. It is. Certainly the degree of pageantry, I think. Kate Jersey Shaw, me too late. Will be hitting replay, baby. Okay. Stephanie, thank you. I'll have to take another look. Okay. Sageti Nona, oh good, does your dog get to go? I'm not quite sure what that means. Anyway, here he is. I don't know if you can see him there. Timmy. Hey. Anyway, he's quite tired, I think. He's been chasing a cat all day. So, for those of you who are late here, he started this episode or the show with a howl, so you can check that out. Yeah, I think that's it, guys. So, for those who are going to be, for those on YouTube who are going to be missing these episodes, you can go and buy my book, The Craven Silence. There's a trilogy of these books. I will be doing the audio book on Patreon. I've already loaded up, I think, 2 chapters, but I'll be continuing that throughout the rest of the month. And based on the interest in that, I might do the next book and the next book, and we'll see how that goes. I'm also going to be doing The Ripper, probably starting at the end of this week, and also covering the Laurie Vallow case, the Daytime documentary. I think there's some other podcast that's also being done, I think, by East Idaho News. I'm planning on writing a book on the Laurie Vallow case, but I want to time it close to the court case. So I need to keep writing just to keep that saw sharp, but the output won't be as much as it usually is. I think the last thing I want to just mention is today is the 8-year anniversary of the murder of Reeva Steenkamp, and that was the case that started me in true crime in 2013. 8 years ago, Oscar Pistorius shot her. We were Facebook friends at that point. At that point in time, I was a magazine journalist. I took a lot of photos. I photographed models as well. And so Reeva Steenkamp and I were friends on Facebook. I was interested in her story. And in 2013, I wrote quite a few magazine articles on Oscar. They were published in a couple of different magazines. And so by 2014, when the Oscar trial got going, I kind of also got going. I started feeling more and more frustrated with what was happening. And I was writing more and more, and that eventually became the books that I wrote on the Oscar Pistorius trial. And that was a case where you saw how difficult it was to get justice done. But anyway, that was where my true crime journey really got its start. It was in 2013 with the Valentine's Day murder of Reeva Steenkamp, but then the year later, the trial kind of kicked off, and me and my partner at the time blogged about it. I sat in court, and we ended up writing quite a few books about it. Kristen Blank says, Happy Valentine's Day. Thank you. Someone asked something about Timmy here, 12-step woman. Does Timmy enjoy Ivy? Very much. They just don't stop playing with each other. It's not a case that the one is getting the upper hand, that both kind of seek one another out to chase one another, to do whatever. So I think they both quite enjoy one another's company. there's more to say about that, which is a bit, it's a little bit, what's the word, awkward to talk about. Timmy hasn't been fixed, and Ivy hasn't been fixed either. And so you have this weird thing where they are both sort of interested in one another. Ivy has just kind of been on heat and she's come off it now. It is a bit awkward to talk about, but it's also just, normal. I think some people would criticize me and say, well, you should have your dog fixed. I think the cat definitely needs to be fixed. Probably seems sexist to say that, but the cat, can't be allowed out because there are other cats in the neighborhood. To me, at this point, I've resolved not to have him fixed, but I might change my mind. I just don't feel like I want to. So let me just explain that in a little bit of detail. I think that one's got to allow animals to be themselves in terms of pets. So to deny them that part of them, so I'm talking about my dog. I personally just think, it's a bit of an inconvenience to me, but I think based on what the vet said to me and also the breeder, they said with a dog it's more important to fix the female. So that's the position I have, but I'm sure there are a lot of you will feel strongly about that that shouldn't be like that, and if you're in the suburbs you shouldn't do that. So I'm sure some people will be very upset and angry about that. I actually just still need to do a bit more research and see what it's like with my dog, but at the moment, no harm done. I've met a couple of dog owners who haven't had their dogs fixed and a couple who have. So I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but at this point, he's not being fixed. But I can see why the cat needs to be fixed. So, I can see how some people are going to be quite upset with me on this. I'm not a professional pet owner where I know the ins and outs, so I could be mistaken, but so far that is the position. So I think I'm about done here. Someone says Stephanie says you are a responsible pet owner, so I appreciate that. I'm humble enough to say, look, I could be wrong, and if someone can explain to me in a way that convinces me, then I will do what I think is right. I'm trying to do what is happy for this dog. I was actually just the last thing I want to say, I was at a friend's house yesterday, and we're actually making homemade pizzas. They've actually built a pizza oven in their back garden, and I had to leave at some point. I'd actually taken Timmy there. There's also another schnauzer there and another dog. At some point, I had to leave the get together briefly, and I just left Timmy there, and they said he went nuts when you left. He couldn't, and it just shows that he's really, really bonded with me in a way that he seems to have like abandonment syndrome, which I don't know if is a good thing. It may actually mean that I need to leave him alone more often, because I don't think it's maybe healthy that he's around me that much. I don't know what you guys think about that. Someone says no declawing cats. Yeah, homemade pizza was pretty good. I've still got a little bit that's left over. Am I South African? Yes, I am. My mother's name was actually Leonie. Where are you from, Leonie? My 3 kitties will never be declawed. Timmy's lucky because he's got so much hair, the claws don't seem to affect him very much. I've never heard there's never been a situation that cat's gotten hold of him where he's made a sound as though he's in pain. Oh, Australia, okay. Do you speak Afrikaans? I can speak Afrikaans. I know a little bit of Korean as well. I know a little bit of some of the black languages, little bits here and there. I know how to trim the claws. Are you talking about cats? I think that's quite tricky because cats need claws to climb trees, and Ivy actually today climbed really high up one of the highest trees in the garden. So cats can stay indoors and live a long life. Okay, so I'm gonna say goodbye to you guys. I hope you guys have a good rest of your Valentine's Day, and have a good rest of your weekend. And I'll see you guys next time. Ciao. Oh, thank you to everyone for your contributions. And I might be back for another live next week talking about the Chris Watts case. I'll see you guys next time.